our second annual President's Concert. 1 year ago, we celebrated the inauguration of our university president, Dr. Donald Christian. Tonight, we continue that celebration. And tonight, we continue that celebration and renew our celebration of our artistic community here at Concordia. We renew that celebration of the gift of music and God's grace to us as his people. A fitting reminder, both from and to Dr. Christian, of the intersection of the arts and leadership. We began with the setting of Michael Dennis Brown's poetry, set by Minnesotan composer Stephen Paulus, who passed away, unfortunately, last year. The words are particularly appropriate to evening prayer. Even with darkness sealing us in, we breathe your name. In keeping with this, we'll sing together, you included, a short bit from our Lutheran heritage of evening prayer, including a setting of a Greek hymn, the Phos Hilaron, that dates back to the first few centuries of the church. Tradition holds that this hymn could have been used for the early church in Jerusalem, while a candle was kept burning in Christ's empty tomb, and was used to light all of the candles of the worshipers that were around. The musical focus of our evening is Mozart's setting of 6 poetic texts from the Vespers, an early and still celebrated version of evening prayer. Composed in 1780 in Salzburg, this work is relatively early in Mozart's works. The young composer is around the age of 24. Wow. In the service of Archbishop Colloredo. In general, this work displays classical balance and poise. Each antecedent has a consequent. Each question has an answer. Each phrase is constructed for intelligibility and simplicity, with instruments supplying the necessary material to link together the primary choral sections. Listen to the first couple of measures of the first movement. Question. Dominus, answer. Domino Deo. We finished our thought. There's all sorts of different. It models the structure that's on the front of your program. This is the dome in Salzburg Cathedral where this work would have been premiered. You can see the symmetry, the elegance to the structure. But it's not the whole of the work, and often that's where we leave the Mozart. To understand this work, we need to examine Mozart's contentious relationship with his archbishop. First, Archbishop Colloredo believed the young Mozart as a court composer was just like any other common servant. Mozart's loud and somewhat extravagant personality, which you can kind of hear in those first couple of measures, and his lifestyle was incompatible with this idea. And he was known to offend his patron by mingling directly with court guests and nobles, asking for payment for performances, and making his church music sound an awful lot like opera. Second, and more applicable to our piece tonight, Colloredo's liturgical reforms are important to the life of Mozart. Colloredo was very much part of the movement in the Catholic Church in the 18th century called Josephinism, after Joseph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, from 1765 to 90. I promise this is where the history lesson ends. This church movement essentially sought to adapt the ideals of the Enlightenment with the Catholic Church politics and policies. These policies included attempting to simplify church practice, releasing some of the, quote, superstitions associated with the Catholic faith. Political reform included taking the church out of politics in a variety of ways and increasing freedom of press and religion and other modern-day ideals. Another reform, more meditative and spiritual aspects of the church were minimized or thrown out entirely. And all church services were to be dramatically reduced in length. And all musical compositions were supposed to be much simplified. This is unfortunate for music history, not so unfortunate for the people sitting on cold pews in dark churches. Much of the innovations in Western classical art music came from the church, certainly before this period. Of course, artists have always faced restrictions, some of them self-inflicted, and found creative and beautiful ways to express truth. And our Mozart work today is proof of this. The Josephinian reforms are present in its length. The work is about a half hour. But look at the immense amount of Latin text that we're going to cover tonight. Flip over to the pages of the song text. An enormous amount of text. Mozart's compositional ingenuity is not repressed by his time limit. And I'm going to show a couple of ways that happens. First, Mozart hides some of the meaning over this very simple choral accompaniment. The orchestra presents the thematic ideas that Mozart doesn't have time to actually and accurately express. Listen to another section of the Dixit, the first movement, but this time with the choir removed. This psalm is about God raising up his servants and strengthening them in a sometimes hostile world. Listen to the raising up that Mozart sets in the violin lines. These themes never show up in the vocal lines. Raising up his people, and yet there's not enough time to make that its own movement. Sometimes the text painting is a little bit more direct. This psalm reaches its climax with the words, "He will crush kings on the day of his wrath, and he will judge the nations." The Latin here is "judicabi in nationibus," and all of this rhythm, you've heard it now twice. All of a sudden, we come to a screeching halt. Stopped. He will come to judge the nations, a stopping of history. This consistent classical rhythm doesn't yet continue. Sometimes Mozart's treatment of the text is more apparent from the words that he repeats in his musical setting, the words that he actually physically repeats, because it turns out you can't actually repeat much. You've got all this Latin text to get through in 30 minutes, 35 minutes. It turns out we can't just keep repeating the Latin, which is what would happen in a longer work, for example, the Mozart Mass in C minor, which we did about 3 years ago here. There's a section in the Confiteor that does this. The text here says, "I acknowledge the majesty of his works, and his righteousness endures forever." This is part of the second movement. There's a couple of words that do repeat in the text, but this text, "I acknowledge the majesty of works, and his righteousness endures," mana is the word here, endures forever. Interesting. There's no way you'd pick up on this in a 35-minute worship service. There's no way you'd pick on it in a 35-minute concert. And yet, there's some interesting bits that Mozart can just slide into the thing, which makes this not just a work that is about getting through with church. Building on the rich tradition of vocal music to which Mozart is well acquainted, he also employs some things that we call madrigale, and some things that come from the Italian tradition. The sixth poem is the Magnificat, Mary's song, "My soul magnifies the Lord." Listen to how the choir sings this bit that says, "He hath sent the rich away empty." Yeah, there's this also the section about he hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. I don't think it's an accident that the sopranos are carrying this, not in any way talking about our sopranos, but Mozart had just met his girlfriend, soon-to-be wife Constance, who was a soprano. You'll hear about that later on. Probably the most compositionally interesting movement of the Vespers, and there are two little excerpts I want to play from this, as the Laudati Puri, the fourth movement. The text here begins, praise, O children, praise the name of the Lord. Praise, O children, praise the name of the Lord, which is usually the way we end up setting this is, praise, O children, praise the name of the Lord. This is not how Mozart sets this text. Listen to this section. This section contains both of the major themes of the movement. Somewhat dark. The piece is in D minor, which is the key in which Mozart wrote the Requiem, the opening overture to Don Giovanni, and the Kyrie he would write in about 6 months. He would write this just after he completes the Vespers. It begins in a very strict fugue. In fact, he borrows that fugue subject from a different composer entirely who is later going to have his job in Salzburg. Mozart plays with this main melody every single way he can. He uses it in its original key. He uses it inverted, which means taking the whole thing and flipping it upside, literally reading the piece of paper upside down, you'll get the inversion. Instead of yum, bum, 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 we get bum, 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 bottom. Just taking the whole thing and flipping it on its head. He uses it in canon, which means doing it's kind of like a row, row, row your boat, but with a much darker idea. In both instruments and in voices, you just heard it. All the singers were singing. It goes ba 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 ba, and all the strings are going. Ya, ta, 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 ta. This is tremendously complex. It's very Baroque. It's tremendously full of history and gravity. Listen to the Gloria Patri, glory be to God the Father and to the Son. It's set in all 6 settings. There's a Gloria Patri. Listen to this one. Solution to this. He clearly means something in this D minor, but there's no good solution to where this came from. One more. One of the Archbishop's requirements to his church music to rid the church of overwrought church music, and especially opera. Didn't want opera anywhere in it. Our arias were totally on the chopping block. You weren't allowed to use them, especially if you've ever seen an opera. Operas are times that we have those longer meditations, one singer, usually soprano, tenor, something like that gets to sing on like one small little text for like 8 minutes, and it's very beautiful, but it takes quite a long time. And you can see what Calreda said, we're not doing any of that anymore. So then consider this excerpt. After that movement, Laudate Pueri, after that movement comes this. Exactly like the same style as the Agra Incarnatus S, if you were at our Mozart C minor concert out a little while ago, 3 years ago. We performed it, and it has pretty much the exact same motives as Susanna's aria Te vieni non tardar from The Marriage of Figaro. This is opera. That's what it is. But what a beautiful punctuation to the more serious fugue, which together show both the fear of God and the peace of God. What a wonderful dichotomy, and one symbolized in the darkness and light of evening prayer. And this is echoed in the final piece that we're going to sing tonight, which is conducted by Dr. Christian, which contains the words, "He that ruleth over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God, and He shall be as the light of the morning, as the sun rising. We'll begin tonight with the section from evening prayer. You're invited to sing along with us.